Over the last while, I've been thinking a lot about the multiverse films being released lately. I recently watched Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumanium on Disney+, which sees Paul Rudd save the quantum realm from Kang, a conqueror who travels from multiverse to multiverse, destroying entire timelines. One scene I found quite interesting was when Ant-Man found himself in a paradoxical area where every possible decision he could make was made, causing more Ant-Men to appear at an exponential rate, like that episode of Rick and Morty. Next, I seen Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse in cinemas. The sequel to Sony's sleeper hit Into the Spider-Verse, this new edition sees Miles Morales traverse through a plethora of spider-universes and timelines. One of the most memorable moments of the film sees Morales travel to a facility full of thousands of different Spider-Men, like that episode of Rick and Morty. Before these, we had films like Spider-Man No Way Home, Marvel's direct-to-Disney Plus series Loki, as well as Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, a film about an eccentric genius travelling through weird and wacky dimensions with a younger, more naive sidekick, like that show Rick and Morty. It seems clear we have reached the golden age of the multiverse in media, with DC now dipping their toes into the multidimensional waters too. And though the idea is not a new concept by any stretch of the imagination, it is fair to say that the multiverse plot type has never been enjoyed at this all-encompassing level before, nor held the pop culture dominance it does today. So, what happened? Is it all Rick and Morty's fault? Or have studios just caught on to the greatest IP recycling machine that's ever existed? Let's turn back the sands of time and find some notable examples of multiverse mayhem in an effort to uncover the true source of this new phenomenon. The year is 2003. 50 Cent was in the club, the White Stripes launched their Seven Nation Army, and all Evanescence wanted was to be brought to life. Those not listening to popular music at the time might have enjoyed that year's cinematic output, such as Scary Movie 3, Legally Blonde 2, Red, White and Blonde, and of course, the smash hit Eddie Murphy comedy, Haunted Mansion. However, for our purpose, we're turning away from the silver screen to focus on that year's television output, specifically Futurama, the Farnsworth Parabox episode. Fans of the show might recall this episode, which sees the Planet Express crew travel to a parallel universe similar to their own. There they meet colour-swapped versions of themselves, and after some initial hesitation, the two crews decide to trust each other. However, after both versions of Dr. Zoidberg steal a box containing the original universe, the crews confront them, causing the crustaceans to knock over an entire bookcase full of boxes, each one containing a different parallel universe. Overall, it was a fun and memorable episode, stuffed full of the visual gags one would expect when travelling through alternate realities. And though I don't believe the term multiverse is used, it's clear to see that this type of adventure is a forerunner to the now common multidimensional hijinks of present day. So let's turn the clocks back even more, to the far-flung past of 1990. Madonna was in vogue, MC Hammer was adamant he not be touched, and nothing compared to Sinead O'Connor. And while cinephiles were wowed by Tom Selleck's performance in Quigley Down Under, we're again turning our attention to the boob tube for our multi-dimensional search. What we find is Star Trek: The Next Generation with quite a few offerings. The first is the episode Yesterday's Enterprise, a truly iconic piece of science fiction which sees everything we've come to know about TNG turned on its head. The Starship Enterprise, once a vessel of exploration, is now a vehicle dedicated to war, stocked with a crew of battle-hardened soldiers locked into a losing war with the Klingon Empire. The catalyst for these events was an anomaly in time, which causes a Federation ship from the past to be transported into the present. What's the problem? The Federation ship was in the middle of assisting a damaged Klingon bird of prey at the time. Well, as you can imagine, and as Picard reasons, if a Federation ship were to have saved a Klingon ship all those years ago, it could have stopped this war before it started. This is when we, the audience, realise that we've been watching an alternate timeline, a parallel universe, if you will. And after some philosophical debating, the other ship is sent back to its own time to die, defending the Klingon ship in the past. The moment they leave, the timeline is returned to normal, with our characters none the wiser of anything that transpired. Several seasons later, TNG again graces us with some interdimensional tomfoolery, this time in an episode aptly named Parallels. This episode is not nearly as fondly remembered as the previous example, but it is probably more relevant to the topic of the multiverse. The story begins with Worf travelling home from a Bathlet competition in which he won first prize. However, once back on the ship, Worf begins to notice several strange occurrences. At first, these things are small, like a painting being hung on a different wall than he remembered, or the flavour of a cake being different than he thought. However, the stakes ramp up as Worf comes into his quarters to find that he's now married to Councillor Troy. It turns out Worf has been shifting through parallel universes this whole time, leaving him unsure of when he was even last in his own timeline. And at the climax of the episode, the Enterprise travels to a time anomaly in order to try and send all the Worfs back to their own universes. It's a memorable sequence where we see hundreds and thousands of Enterprises appear on screen, including one from a timeline where the Borg have overrun humanity. The Riker from that universe, who looks a little worse for wear, begs the others not to send him back to die. However, as any true Star Trek fan knows, the Prime Directive applies, even in parallel universes. Our Worf is returned to our Enterprise and the timelines are set right again. And despite not being as popular as yesterday's Enterprise, Parallels is surely a truer contender for one of the first proper multiverse examples in media. The subtle set changes, uniform changes, difference in characterization, this approach would seem to lay the foundation for what seems to be the standard multiverse romp today. Finally, one last honourable mention from Star Trek, with the episode Tapestry. This episode sees Picard wonder what his life would be like if he had been more responsible in his youth. However, after Picard sees the alternate timeline where he was responsible, he realises that those youthful regrets and indiscretions are what made him the man he is today. I was going to go into a bit more detail about this episode, but while thinking of a way to describe it, I couldn't help but say it's like Star Trek's version of It's a Wonderful Life, which made me realise the year is 1946. People are listening to music like The Coffee Song, Old Buttermilk Sky, and Guitar Polka. Children and families were drawn to the movie theatres to see Walt Disney's latest offering, Song of the South. However, there was another film released that year, which was It's a Wonderful Life. And unlike Song of the South, It's a Wonderful Life is fondly remembered today and is a Christmas staple in most homes. But forget for a moment the brilliant characters and performances, the earnest tale of a man's life lived through compromise for others, and the final tear-jerking scene of a lifetime of good deeds being repaid. Instead, focus on the multi-universal implications of the film. We all know the story. George Bailey wishes he was never born, and thanks to his guardian angel, he has the opportunity to see what that alternate timeline would be like. His brother is dead. The town has become a combination shanty town, red light district under the villainous Potter's mismanagement. And worst of all, Mary, George's wife, is now an unmarried librarian. And after roaming through this alternate universe for a while, George realises that things weren't so bad in his timeline and asks to be returned. Clarence, his guardian angel, makes it so and restores the timeline and earns his wings. And though George Bailey only visits one parallel universe in this film, that doesn't exclude the possibility of other universes existing too. If George hadn't learned his lesson as soon as he did in the film, I think it's entirely possible that Clarence would have taken him from one reality to another to drive that point home. That would have been something to see. A world-weary George Bailey travelling from dimension to dimension with the innocent and childlike Clarence. He reminds me of that show, Quantum Leap. So, it seems the multiverse is no new concept at all. Though Hollywood has leaned into the idea quite heavily recently, it is clearly something much older. Indeed, beyond cinema and television, how old is the concept of what if? In another time, another place, in another life maybe. What do we mean when we say these phrases? A parallel universe? An alternate timeline? Or some different dimension? Whatever you choose to call it, it's probably safe to say that whatever the multiverse is, it's not Rick and Morty's fault.
Oh my god, Morty, what did you do? You killed the Simpsons, Morty!